Today we're going to be turning this 2x4 into a Baker Builds shad. The first step is we got to plane the board down, get it nice and square, and you see the round edges on there. We're going to square it up and we're going to dimension it so we can build our bait. This is thicker than the bait's going to be by quite a bit, so we'll have to take some down on the bandsaw. It's nice and square and flat now. Now we can put our template on there and take it over to the bandsaw. All right, well there's one cut out. I'll have to take it to the sander. So we're gonna go off script here a little bit. I put a center line in here. I'm actually gonna cut these in half just because they're so thick, which will make it a little thinner than what Baker Builds used. I think he used 3/4. It's gonna be pretty close though, and that way we'll have 4 of them. Okay, so with the dimension changes, the template doesn't fit, obviously. This is skinnier than what he used, but I just got it lined up as best I could. And this is our cut line for the broken back, and I just transferred it all the way across. That way we can come in here and cut it nicely on both sides evenly. So we've got a 45-degree cut 2x4. We got it lined up right on that line there. You take this saw, just run it right on the edge, and make sure you clamp it down. All right, got it cut close. This center line isn't quite right, so, but I'm gonna come in here and do the other side. All right, that's close enough for now. We'll finish it off later once we've shaped and sanded. So we gotta get these edges down close to the line, and it's actually easier to use this over the bandsaw. So that's what I'm gonna use. Yeah, this is where me and Baker are gonna kind of part ways. I'm gonna sand this down and shape it before I drill any holes for the weights. And then I'm gonna seal it and do a buoyancy test to see how much weight I need it to sink with. And then we'll go in here and drill holes for weights, and we'll add the weight so we can get it a little tail heavy. Like my glide bait's a little tail heavy, gives you better walking action. And there's no right way to do this. He's not wrong the way he did it. This is just the way I prefer to do mine. So I've decided I don't really like this wooden tail. So I'm gonna go ahead and cut it off here, and then we'll make either a Lexan one or a brush tail to go in here instead. Before I start hand sanding, I wanna go in here and mark the eye location so I can get that drilled so we can sand it. The cavities look a lot better if you round the edges of them before you put your eyeballs in. So we're gonna go ahead and do that. The easy way to do this is what Baker did too, is just get your other piece of your template and line it up on here, just like that. Make sure it's nice and lined up. And you just take a little push pin and you insert it right there. And I do this all the time for the screw eyes as well. It just makes life a whole lot easier. So now we just gotta flip it over and line it up. We have our hole to punch. I can check for symmetricness by, pivoting. As far as I can tell, looks pretty close enough for me. So normally I'll use 3/8, I believe, paddle bit. I put the big eyes in there, but since this is so far forward here, I'm gonna use a 1/4 inch drill bit. And this is my least favorite part. I'm terrible at drilling holes. Oops, that's a little too much. Well, kind of screwed up there. So I'm just gonna cut it back here and reshape it. All right, I've cut it back, I've reshaped it, and we'll get it symmetrical later. It's pretty close. I'm gonna take some down over here. Really, the best thing you can do is make everything symmetrical. I mean, even if it looks terrible, if it's nice and symmetrical, it's probably gonna swim pretty good. I'll come in here with some 80 grit and sand this down. And since we're no longer really on the template at all, I'm just gonna bring the eye back here. I'm gonna put a nice big one in there. So I'm gonna come in there with my 3/8 inch paddle bit. It's my favorite one. It's the bigger eyes, but I like the bigger eyes, so. Just like that. I want to make sure they're about the same depth. Otherwise you'll have like a weird thing with the symmetry. And so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in here with 80 grit and I'm going to sand this down and then I'll go to 120. And I'm going to spare you that because it's just really boring and tedious. But when you see it again, it'll be nice sanded and it should be pretty symmetrical. All right, so there you go. It's nice and sanded. It's pretty symmetrical. Should work for our purposes here. It is off a little bit right here. I'm gonna try to fix that. But yeah, sand your eye cavities, man. It's just way nicer finish afterward. Once you drop an eye in there, you got this nice sanded outside. It looks way better than if you just leave it straight. So I'm gonna go ahead and seal this once I fix this little spot. And then we'll do a weight test in some water, buoyancy test, and then we'll know how much weight to put in this just to make it sink. And I left this pretty square back here. Normally you would taper this a lot, but I want to be able to put some weight in here. Most of the weight, actually. Put most of the weight up here, and we'll put a little weight here just so it sinks a little more level. I'm gonna seal this here with just some matte tan. Any kind of spray paint will work, even clear. Basically what we're gonna do here is we're gonna put this thing of water on the scale, zero it out and put it in grams. We're gonna take our lure, we're gonna completely submerge it. And we're gonna get our weight there. It's like 24. So I always like to do this twice just because you can have air bubbles trapped. See, 25. Okay, so one more time. And 25. Okay. I learned this from the engineering angler. Basically, we're displacing 25 grams of liquid, so this bait needs to be over 25 grams for it to sink. And if you want it to float, you know, under 24 grams or right at 24 or 25 grams, that'll probably get you where you want to be. Get you really close anyway. So now we're gonna weigh the lure. And we're gonna see, okay, so we had 25 grams buoyancy displacement. The lure is at 12 grams. So that means we need to add 13 grams for this to sink. Because we're gonna want it to sink. You can make glide baits that float, but I prefer the ones that sink slowly, very slowly, because I fish shallow water a lot, so I want them to sink really, really slow. And I like to work my baits really slow like that in shallow water. So what this tells us is we're gonna have to put quite a bit of weight into this bait. I know my hardware is gonna weigh right around 4 grams, just based off other lures I've made. So that'll get us to 16 grams. We're still gonna need over 9 grams of weight. So we're gonna put some big holes back here, a couple big holes up here, and then we'll use our Lee pot, I think it's a Lee pot, melting pot, and we'll use bismuth, just because it's non-toxic. I prefer to use it. And we'll fill these cavities up and we'll get it to sink. So as you saw from my last drilling experience, I'm not very good. So what I normally do is I'll take the drill bit and I'll just like hand do these holes to start. And then I'll come in here and hope I don't screw it up. Okay, so we got 2 nice holes there. I'm gonna do these back ones. I'm gonna actually try to connect these holes, just so I can get a little more weight back here than up front. So I got in there with the razor knife. It's not very clean, but it'll work. Now we gotta heat the lead up. And I may do something weird here. And I may put a screw eye right here. I think I will, before I pour the lead. And I'm just gonna make it a little more difficult to finish it. But otherwise, I'm gonna have a problem putting it in later. And I do want to hook back here. So I don't recommend doing this, but since this bait is so small and I want to put 2 hooks on it, this is what I'm doing. I got the screw eye in the hole. I'm gonna fill this up with bismuth here and here as well. And then it's gonna take a lot of finish work. It doesn't look too great right now, but you know, finish work is where you really get the good quality in. And every time you paint it, you'll raise the grain, and you need to sand it again anyway. I had some paint come off there too. So I go ahead and fill the weight holes here. These pots are fantastic. They're a little expensive, but if you have the money, that's the way to go. All right, so now I gotta check the weight. I know this weighs a gram right here. This is not gonna be on the final. This is it's just handy to, you know, paint and do stuff when you got this little handhold. So let's put it on here and see. Okay, so that put us to 20 grams. So with the 4 grams of hardware, we're gonna be pretty close. We probably need at least 1 more gram of weight though. And obviously that's 1 gram right there. So we are putting joint hardware in here, so that's gonna add a little extra. Not sure if it'll be enough, but let's put the hardware stuff on here and then we'll find out. Okay, so I think if we use these mega eyelids, and we'll see if they fit for the joint hardware, I think we'll have enough weight to sink. Also, we can add stuff like this, It's not a lot of weight, but it is some more, just for cups for the front. And put the rest of this on here. I've also been using these hook hangers for the bellies. It helps so you don't get your hooks hung up on each other, especially on these small baits. Okay, so there we have it. There's 25 grams. So after the eyes go on, the tail goes on, and the paint and the epoxy coating for the finish, we should sink. We're gonna sink really slow, but we should sink. So with this information, it gives me the confidence to go ahead and fill these holes. Probably use baking soda and super glue, and then we'll get it rough sanded, nice and smooth, and then go ahead and cut these out. Here, I made a hinge with those big ones. Just opened them one up, slipped it around the other, and then closed it back up. And we'll use that. We'll use that in here for the hardware. So I drew up the shape I want for the tail on one of these dive bibs I have. I'm gonna go ahead and cut it out, and we'll get it fit up. There we go. So as you can see, it fits pretty good. I think there's plenty of space for us to epoxy it in here. I might need to come in a little bit more, but it fits good and it looks pretty good. So I'm gonna sand this probably with 320, the whole thing. So we went ahead and filled filled these holes with super glue. I didn't use any baking soda. I didn't film that. I mean, it's pretty basic. Just put some glue over it and get it to, so you can sand it down. So go ahead and sand this down. I'm gonna finish cutting this out, and we're gonna do our we're gonna do a hardware test fit. Got it sanded down. We're gonna go ahead and we're gonna get it cut. And you can take this back to the vise if you're scared you're gonna mess it up, but I'm not scared. So. And there we go. So what I recommend doing now, and you might normally see these cut the other direction, but what I did it this way so I can take this profile, I can actually taper it in, and we'll get a better swimming action. And there's just more meat on the body than there is on the tail for that. So we'll taper this inside, we'll put the hardware in there, and it'll swim a lot nicer, because if you just put the hardware in there, you're gonna get a very limited range of motion. So I always come back probably about a ½ inch or quarter to ½ inch, depending on how big your bait is. And I'll do that on the belt sander. So we brought it back in quite a bit. I'll show you now that when your hardware is in there, you can get this the right way, stick out, and you're gonna get a lot better range before you start hitting than you would if you had just left it that way. And of course, you're gonna wanna put a flat here so you can drill your holes and install your hardware. And you also wanna keep it symmetrical still. And in this really soft wood, I'm just gonna push pin it, and then I'm gonna screw in one of these sides, each of these sides. I like to screw in one side. You can't do both sides that way. If this is fixed, this is not gonna spin. So you have to epoxy in this side over here. But I always like to screw in one side, just because I think it gives a better holding. Yeah, it's a pretty big gap. We're gonna go ahead and glue it though. We're gonna see what happens. All right, well, it's all glued in place. And yeah, you definitely can see a lot of the joint hardware. Typically you would just use these vertical ones and then like come in here, slice it down and put a rod basically through here. But we needed the extra weight, so, and this is all just an experiment to see how this works. It's not perfect. But lure building really is all about experimentation. If you want a perfectly functioning lure, you know, you go buy one. If you want to make a lure that has a different action or has a better action, that's when you start making them. You gotta put all the hardware on and all the hooks, everything, so we can go balance test in the tub, and we can see how it sinks or how it doesn't sink. If it doesn't sink, we've got to find out exactly how it's sitting in the water column, how it falls, you know, all the things. We got all the hardware on, so we're gonna see how it sits in the water. Okay. Don't look too bad. I'll get you a better view here. That looks about right. I'm using some high performance enamel from Rust-Oleum. This is a shiny silver, and it's really shiny, but it smells absolutely terrible.
Hey, can I borrow your odorant?
Yeah, I got smelly garbage or old dumpster.
So I was gonna airbrush this bait, but I decided to show y'all that you don't need fancy tools to paint your lures. I'm gonna use a matte black, and I'm gonna spray it just like this with it facing away, so it will just get this back area, and then we'll come in here and we'll put some spots for the shad color, and then it'll be done. And you don't need an airbrush to make lures. So I'm very colorblind. Apparently this is actually brown and not black. I would recommend using black, although, well, for me, I can't tell the difference. But I think it turned out pretty good. And normally I'd airbrush these and then epoxy finish them, but since we're kind of going with the anyone can do this theme, I'm just gonna use a matte clear spray and just use that instead, just to show you it really doesn't take a lot of equipment to make lures like these. So now we gotta pick out some eyes. I kind of like those yellow ones. I'm gonna go with these ones here. Yellow. I don't know what color they are. Those are the ones I like. Put a dab of glue in there. If you're not gonna epoxy coat it, you really want to glue these eyes in pretty well. The epoxy holds the eyes over top as well as if you glue them in there. So you have like the double adhesion, but when you're just using a spray, you really need to get these glued and glued well. And go ahead and remove the tape on the tail here. Still got a little carving detail to do on the tail. And this tape's really holding on. And there you have it. I think it turned out pretty good. And once we hang the hooks here, clear coat it and hang the hooks, we can take it to the water and see how it works. Also got to carve the details in here. All right, since we already used brown, we're just gonna use some more brown. So you just put a little bit of brown in your cup or whatever. And then you get a paper towel ready. And what you're gonna do is you're gonna take this and you're gonna brush on this brown paint onto both sides. Black works better, but we're using brown today. So once you got both sides painted, it's that way. You're gonna come in here with your napkin. You're gonna wipe off all that excess. All that's not in the crevices. And then you got your crevices, got paint in them, and the rest doesn't. And that gives you, move the camera here, gives you a nice little look to it. I think it looks pretty accurate to the fish, and that's what we're trying to replicate. Well, there she is after clear coat and hooks. I think it turned out pretty good. That matte clear coat really didn't stay that matte. I feel like it's pretty shiny still, which is good. It's shiny is better. You want something flashy. So now we just got to take this to the lake and see how it works.